introduce Dr. Sterett Mercer, who is the incumbent for the Chris Spencer Foundation Professorship in Special Education Learning Difficulties, Dyslexia. Dr. Mercer.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. I went very low tech today. It's 10 minutes, so no slides necessary. It's a brief talk, so I'm going to focus on kind of three aspects of the mandate of the professorship and my plans for the upcoming year. The first is pursuing a research program in the field of learning disabilities with an emphasis on reading and related writing difficulties. That's essentially my core research program. A lot of that works in the area of curriculum-based measurement, which is a paradigm that developed kind of in the late 70s as a method to evaluate students' progress toward meeting individualized education plan goals. It's grown beyond that to be a method of identifying students in need of educational supports, to monitor their progress during intervention, and beyond that to evaluate programs and conduct research, that incorporates formative assessment. My second main area is just theory-driven evaluation of academic interventions. Not necessarily what works and what doesn't work, but why do different things work? Because that gives you a framework to be able to evaluate, even in the absence of no information, would this be the sort of program that would tend to be effective for students based on the content that's included in it. For the upcoming year in the area of curriculum-based measurement, I'm just embarking on a project refining some written expression CBM assessments. In the area of written expression CBM, it's not as well developed as the area of reading. Reading is a little bit, it's more high interest, a little bit easier to assess because generally the student's response is dictated in part by the reading materials that are in front of them. In the area of written expression, typically you don't have kind of grade level prompts. I mean, you might give a child a writing task and possibly some constraints on time limits, and then you have to figure out what to do with it. And that's essentially what the project will work on. For early writing, just students' productivity and transcription skills, just the ability to get something on paper, seems to be the primary limiting factor. Obviously, it becomes more complex as students start to attend to genre and other aspects of writing. So to figure out a way of actually scoring some of these writing samples, we're going to look at computerized discourse analysis. So essentially, you can enter writing samples in, get a variety of metrics based on lexical diversity, referential cohesion, other aspects of writing that aren't easily hand-scored, which is some of the more traditional measures. And it's essentially wide open at this point. We're just looking at the basic validity. To what extent do those metrics capture or correspond with what raters would evaluate on those writing samples, and to what extent do they serve as just a general indicator of writing performance? So if we give a student a writing sample and score them with these different measures, to what extent would students who score poorly on that also score poorly on a variety of writing tasks, and to what extent would those metrics capture growth in writing skill over the course of a year? The second main aspect related to that is in the area of individual reading fluency interventions for the upcoming year. For a while I've been very interested in the extent to which incorporating vocabulary instruction in reading fluency interventions, which a prototypical one would just be repeated readings. Kids would read a short, simple passage for them several times until a certain degree of automaticity is gained. To what extent would broadening that to incorporate discussion of concepts, trying to keep some of that consistent over time, would that actually improve reading comprehension more than just improving text reading automaticity? All that stuff's in progress. So those are my main projects. I also supervise a variety of students on mostly reading intervention studies using single case design. As an example of some projects that are underway, I have a student currently seeing the extent to which providing students reading fluency intervention in French for students in French immersion programs would have kind of cross-linguistic effects. Would that also improve their English reading fluency, even though that's not being targeted? Another project is looking at the extent to which incorporating student choice of materials and reading fluency interventions which kind of sounds like a no-brainer. You think people would do that, but actually in reading fluency intervention, people focus a lot more on just the difficulty of the text, because they want to make sure that the texts aren't too difficult. But we know that incorporating choice can improve student motivation and so on, so that's one project related to it. And a third is looking at upper elementary students and ways to incorporate instruction in decoding of multisyllabic words in the context of reading fluency intervention, if that will assist them in developing automaticity on informational text and improve comprehension. So that's one aspect of the mandate in terms of the research. One other aspect is just community engagement. In terms of encouraging good instructional practices and intervention in schools. Recently, I've started working with the Learning Disability Association of Vancouver. It's still very much in the early phases. So far, we've spoken a lot about their assessment model and really formative assessment model, ways that they can see the extent to which the services they are providing to students are effective. They serve about 200 students per year and provide several hours of individual intervention per week, so they have a pretty robust model in terms of service delivery. To grow in that area, you need to actually show that you're having an impact. I believe they are, but we need some data in that regard. I'm excited about it for several reasons. One, it provides an opportunity for students to work in that setting and gain some experience when we have overlapping research interests. Beyond the program evaluation, some questions they're interested in are to what extent do you get similar outcomes when you provide intervention small group versus individually? Obviously, if you can get similar gains in small groups, then you've increased your reach and impact. And I hope that over the course of this year and upcoming years, we can work together to address some of those research questions. The last aspect of the mandate that I'll focus on is just adapting graduate courses, teaching practicum placements in these areas. I already do that. I teach courses in curriculum-based measurement, which essentially that course, the way I think about it, is it's a course on data-based individualization of academic interventions. Ways that you can, for students who aren't responding to packaged intervention programs, that you can essentially experiment and find something that will work for the student and show that it works, based on diagnostic assessment and ongoing progress monitoring. So that in that course, they get that content and also do that with cases. It's a required course and some of the concentrations for special education and also school psychology. One thing that I really enjoy in that course, a lot of the students are teachers, and they have flexibility around those projects where essentially the requirement of the project is to incorporate formative assessment in something that you do and see if it's working. And it's really amazing to see teachers incorporate those skills in class. And one, see the impact that they're having, and two, being able to communicate that with administrators and other people to hopefully advocate for more time to do those sorts of things in future years. That's it. Thank you.
Sterett, thank you. Before you go away,
Yes.
Does anyone have a question for Sterett? I have one. I'm curious about
Yes.
whether you're working with a particular age group in the schools, or what's the range that would be relevant for your work?
Right. I mostly work in elementary, in part just based on the notion of just it's easier to fix problems before they become huge. That's in part the focus. But I am interested in older students, and particularly in the area of writing. I think some of these issues related to writing assessment, particularly for students in secondary, where it really is genre-based and quite complex. It'll be interesting to explore those issues. We don't necessarily have plans to do it yet. For that project, we're mostly focusing on upper elementary, but that's definitely something I'm interested in. So.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh,
Yes.
Do you work in private and public schools?
I do. In school psychology, many of the practicum placements are the Catholic independent schools. just due to historical association with the program. So that's been one aspect. With the partnerships with LD Association of Vancouver, it's a little bit of both. They provide some of the stuff on site. They also have partnerships with several VSB schools to run after-school programs, and I believe they have some sites that are in community centers as well. So,
And have you noticed any difference between private and public? Do you analyze your data that way?
I don't. In general, most of the studies that I do in intervention would have a within student design, so essentially comparing their progress with intervention to how they were doing before. So it very much is a focus on the techniques themselves and not necessarily the setting, although it is an interesting question for sure.
Sterett, thanks very much.